I know this is a little bit off Google Play, but I'm curious about the idea of the podcast. Is the podcast audio that you did for your books before the professional narration was done, was it just a short-term
There was a
podcast
movement.
series that you did?
There was a movement back 2006 through 2009 called the Patio Books, podcast novelist movement. Scott Sigler, J.C. Hutchins, Michael J. Sullivan, some of the folks have really just knocked it out of the park coming out of that realm. And I had friends that were encouraging me at the time. I was looking for good book marketing. At the time, I don't think I'd sold 1,000 books. I was depressed. I lost money. I knew my story. I believed in it. I believed if I got it to readers that they would enjoy it as much as I did, but I had made some critical mistakes in my publishing journey, and I was sitting on a whole lot of books I'd printed and I wasn't selling them. So when a friend of mine said, hey, you ought to look at what J.C. Hutchins and Scott Sigler are doing over at Patio Books and building audiences by narrating their own books, and maybe not even all that well at times. The audience is there and they're eating it up and they're getting feedback and all these things are happening. They're building these communities. Okay, eventually capitulated because it is a lot of work. I did 3 novels. It took me 3 months. I'm terrible at editing audio. You never want to edit audio again. And at the end of the day, I had this podcast, which is episodic. It's like a television show. There's an intro, there's an outro, might be a little chat at the beginning and the end. It's not an audiobook. And so I realized kind of 2007-ish that I had that, and I was approached by a publisher who wanted to publish my audiobooks. And I said, well, I've got these ones that I narrated. I can take the episodic part out and just make a straight narration audiobook. And we did that. And frankly, it was a 2.5-star effort. It was a 4.5-star effort as a podcast. Has had millions of episodes downloaded, but as a paid product, as an audiobook, my narration was insufficient.
Different expectation among the listeners.
Just a different expectation.
Yeah.
And so when I went back and put up the professionally narrated version, now it's a 3.5-star effort. So we probably could have done better, but we definitely could have done worse. That said, those books earned out after 2 years, and now they're my primary earners. Those things pay my mortgage now, so I'm not going to complain.
Nice. No, feel free to say you need to talk to a lawyer about that. But one of the things I've been thinking of is reading. I have about 5 Ann Kinnear suspense shorts that feature characters in the Ann Kinnear suspense novels. And I've been trying to figure out a way to use those to promote sales of the books. I sell the shorts for 99 cents on Amazon and the other online retailers, but I really want to get them to buy into the novel series. Yeah. And so do you know if there are legal considerations to me reading one of those, for example, on a Facebook Live?
Are you your own publisher?
Yes.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not you reading it? No, not at all. I think legally, I know from reading through their agreements that you're allowed to use, a portion of your recorded work. I believe it's the first 10%, or I'd have to go back and look at it, so don't quote me on this. But I believe it's the first 10% or an hour of your audiobook you can use as a sample. So I use that a lot. But for you to go out and do a spoken voice reading, even if you wanted to record it, that's not creating another audiobook, especially if you're only doing a portion of it. If you're doing less than an hour of it, you could just use your audiobook for that sample if you really wanted to. So I think you'd be perfectly within your rights. And I doubt they would give you a hard time, even if you read most of it in that kind of setting. Like if you said, okay, I'm going to do a live reading once a week and we're going to read a chapter a week for so long. I've seen other authors do that have their audiobooks up, and it actually seems like a pretty smart technique. And part of the fact is if you have, this worked with podcasts as well. When you drop an audiobook, you put the product on sale. When you drop a podcast, you're usually dropping an episode every week. And I know authors that are successful that are now going back and rerunning their podcasts from years ago. And at the end of every episode, if you don't want to wait, you just go buy the audiobook.
Yeah.
You'll do the thing. It's great. It's a wonderful way to promote it. And the best part about it is it builds communities.
Yes.
And it gets to people feel like they know you. If I'm in somebody's ears for 70 hours, they know me. I guess for the first, it's 25. I did 25 hours, and the full series, if you listen to Chris, is 77 hours. without the last, it's almost like 100 hours if you take the whole series. But at that point, there's an attachment level that is created. And Chris Snellgrove, who narrated the series, I met him through podcasting. And he had narrated The House of Grey by Colin Earl, still one of my favorite podcast novels of all time. That's from listening to that, I felt like I knew those guys. And then I met them at a conference, and then I didn't know them. But I've been through that experience multiple times because I just enjoyed that whole arena. I had a radio show that I was a co-host of. I'd been invited to join Patio Racket that Rhonda Carpenter and Heather Rulo had started, where they interviewed podcast novelists about their patio books as they were released. And it's just a wonderful experience. It really encapsulated that indie spirit. And I've translated the model that I learned there over to what I do on Twitter, which is interesting. You wouldn't equate the two, but
No.
it's that audience building, engaging with folks, not asking for anything, just telling them a story.
Yep.
Just making them laugh, giving them something to smile about. And if you do that long enough, and you do happen to have some products that are for sale, you'll end up selling a bunch of them, has been my experience. And a lot of that experience came from doing those podcast novels. And I don't know, it was a terrible monetization strategy. I don't think there's anybody who came out of that world who would say, oh yeah, you'll make money doing podcast novels. That's not it. It's all about audience building. And then it's kind of a long game, right? Audience building to sell your other products. But I think it's a great way, or just podcasting in general. You don't have to podcast your work. You can podcast things that are about your work or related to your work. Personally, I like the author interview space because I can never write enough content to satisfy readers. So it's nice to talk to others. This video that we're doing right here is the type of thing that I think is really a good way of low cost producing content that's valuable to people and at the same time builds your audience.